Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Welcome to the next edition of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host today. I am super excited to welcome to the show a new friend, Nathalie McGloin, who is, and I'm going to read this list, Nathalie, FIA Commission President, keynote speaker, disabled race driver through both race and rally, disabled motorsport consultant, brand ambassador, charity co-founder, an all-round badass. Nathalie, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be on the show. I don't know if that list makes me kind of master of none and jack of all, but yeah, no, thank you. That was quite
master of all. And this is what we're going to cover in the podcast. So first of all, thanks for being a good sport and coming on. I know you are ridiculously busy. I follow you on social media and LinkedIn, etc., etc. So I see you're doing lots of these interviews. You're clearly trying to raise awareness, trying to do so many other wicked cool things. And you're also a regional neighbour because you live literally just around the corner from me. So thank you so much for coming on. I have an immense list of questions. I'm not going to bombard you with too many of them, but I really want to talk about basically the genesis behind sort of your story and why you're sort of here and what you're doing in life in general. And then there are so many other topics, including FIA Commission President and other things that I just think our listeners are going to want to listen to. So if it's okay, for those that maybe aren't aware of your story, your background, is it possible just to share a little bit of a sort of narrative behind sort of A to B, the past to present day?
Yeah, so I was injured in a car crash when I was 16, broke my neck. And then 16 years later, in 2015, I became the first woman with a spinal cord injury to be granted a racing license in the UK. And then in 2019, I became the first woman with a spinal cord injury to be granted a rally license in the UK. And I am currently the only female tetraplegic to have ever held any kind of motorsport license in the world. Obviously, for those that follow motorsport, people know that women and men compete together, might not know that disabled people also compete alongside non-disabled drivers. So I predominantly compete against able-bodied men. Yeah, so Commission President, you mentioned in 2018, I was asked to become the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission President by John Todd, which I've been doing since then, which is incredible. We make sure that motorsport is accessible for disabled people across the world. I'm also a co-founder of the charity Spinal Track, which is a charity that gives disabled track and rally novices their first experience driving focus cars, either a track car or a rally car, around Silverstone or the Bilgwyn Rally School at Tweston. So yeah, that's
So you're quite busy. So you're quite busy doing stuff. I think I've got so many questions to ask. So the one thing that really interests me is actually the comment about which I already knew about male versus female versus disabled. Mm-hmm. And so my brain's now thinking, are there any other sports where that exists, where actually, even from a crowd perspective, they might not even realise that from diverse backgrounds and different abilities, due to whatever reason, are literally competing against each other?
So there are other sports where there's kind of like mixed ability competition, but motorsport is the only sport in the world where there doesn't exist a separate category. So, for example, sailing, non-disabled and disabled people can compete together in competition, but obviously at Paralympics there is a para class for that sport. And I think every other sport, I think there might be an exception, flying sports, I don't know the right terminology. Yeah. I don't think that a subcategory exists for that either, but motorsports as a kind of mainstream sport is the only sport in the world that can boast that disabled and non-disabled drivers compete on level playing field, as well as men and women. And you know, it's all about the skill level and the bravery level. And you know, I thought that's one of the reasons that I fell in love with the sport, just being able to do something on level terms with able-bodied people is not something that disabled people can do easily in other walks of life.
Yeah, and sort of pre the accident when you were 16, were you into motorsport? Was that something that you followed?
Nope, didn't have any idea about motorsport. The only thing I could tell you about motorsport before my accident is my pop watched it on a Sunday, and if we were in his house, my nana and pop, we wouldn't be allowed to speak to him because he'd be watching Formula One. But aside from that, I didn't have any interest in racing, knew nothing about it up until mid-20s. And even when I started track days, I didn't really know anything about motorsport. So I'm quite new to the subject in terms of, you know, like heritage and stuff.
Yeah, being a fan. How were you introduced to track days? So what was the sort of the genesis and journey there? Because one thing being introduced to it, but that now you're a sort of badass race driver, beating men and doing loads of other cool stuff. So that's how did that happen?
So before I started down kind of the motorsport journey, I was a wheelchair rugby athlete. And yeah, so that was as soon as I graduated from university, I started playing wheelchair rugby full time. Cool. I was on the GB squad, and that was my reason for everything, really. You know, with sports, it's all or nothing often. And I got introduced to track days through a new friend that I'd made in France at a wheelchair rugby tournament. And I had got a 911, and he had just bought a new BMW M3, and he told me that his M3 was faster than my 911. And I knew nothing really about cars at the time. I just thought the Porsche 911 was the fastest car in the world and nothing could beat it. And he said, well, why don't you come on a track day and we'll see if your theory's right. And I had no idea what track days were, but I thought this sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So I went along, and my first track day I got absolutely hooked. And it was then an expensive hobby whilst I was trying to break into the Paralympic squad. So
wow. And who won? What was quicker?
The M3. So annoying.
but now you race Caymans, right? So you race Porsche Cayman S. And so educate those listening to this, what race series is that? And you know, and obviously with COVID, what's going on with that? And
so this year I haven't done any racing. I dip in and out of quite a few different championships. So I used to race in the Porsche Club Championship. That was where I started. And last year I did a bit of 750 and CSCC. I was meant to be racing in the Porsche Cayman Sprint Challenge this year in a Cayman GT4, but we haven't managed to be able to get the hand controls to work effectively with the car. So that's going to be delayed until next year. But yeah, like COVID hasn't been the only reason that I haven't been racing, but it's just been like a knock-on effect. There was a lot of development that I was doing off season with the car, and because of COVID it got delayed, and then just everything went a bit wrong. So really, I haven't done like a fast lap around the circuit this year. I've been to 4 test days. Each time there's been something wrong with the car, which has been frustrating. But yeah, I haven't put in a fast lap, which is so annoying.
But there's next year, right? And then
there is next year.
It's going to be next year for all of us, in
definitely.
whatever capacity. And so something you said earlier, so 2015 was when you got the race license.
Mm-hmm.
And you were the first.
Yep.
It's going to seem like a pretty obvious question, but why has it taken till 2015 for that to happen, for you to be the first? My brain's thinking, why has that not happened before that? What's been the hurdles or the blockages? Or
well, being a tetraplegic presents added challenges, because a lot of people won't know the difference between tetraplegics and paraplegics. So paraplegics are people that have broken their backs, so they're paralyzed in varying degrees from the chest to kind of the waist down, but don't have any limitations with their hands or arms. If you're a tetraplegic, it means that your arms and hands are affected. So I haven't got full hand function. So gripping the wheel and changing gear and hand controls and stuff, just it's possible, but it presents, it's not an obvious choice for a tetraplegic, just put it that way. So that's probably one of the reasons why I'm the first. But again, like the female issue within racing, there is a small proportion of females that make up the motorsport license or racing license holders. So if you then combine that with someone with a spinal injury and a tetraplegic, the likelihood of someone holding that title, I guess, is very, very slim. And it's like with the young girls wanting to go racing. If people like you aren't visibly active in a sport, it makes it difficult for other people like you, so female tetraplegics, to aspire to wanting to do that. So I'm hoping that with the work of the Commission and my profile within motorsport, that we'll see more females with any kind of disability coming into the sport.
Good, yeah, and more to it. And so let's talk about the FIA Commission role. So you were asked to do it 2017?
2018.
2018, sorry. And so what's... So
no,
first of all,
2017, it is 2017.
Sorry. First of all, what was that like being asked? And secondly, what's the role? What are you doing? What are the hopes and aspirations for the coming, not just the coming year, but decades, and the legacy that you hope to sort of build there?
So I was asked by Graham Stoker, who's the Vice President for Sport for the FIA, to go to the International Sport Conference to speak on my experience of kind of getting my license and just disabled motorsport in general. And so I was one of the keynote speakers at the event. He'd seen me speak at the FIA Women in Motorsport Conference in Portugal the year before, which came about through just a friend mentioned me to one of the organisers, and I got an invite. And Jean Todt heard me speak in 2017 in Geneva on the subject of disabled motorsport and safety. And it was crazy, because it was an event that was full of motorsport legends, and Jean Todt knew who I was, and he congratulated me on kind of a job well done for my talk. And I thought, oh, that's fantastic. Jean actually knows that I exist, and getting praise from Jean is a big thing. Yeah. So I thought nothing of it, and came home, and I was contacted by the FIA to go to Paris in September of that year to what I thought was to give more advice and just experience about getting my license. And before the meeting, I think about 2 weeks before, I had a request for my CV. And I was like, this is really weird. And I said to my partner, Andrew, imagine if they offer me a job. And when I said it, I believed it was so far away from reality that it was just a joke. Yeah. And I thought, oh, well, you know, the FIA are a global organisation. Maybe this is just how they function. Maybe they want to know what my experience is so that they can see how relevant my opinions are.
Yeah.
And so we went along to Paris, and I met with a couple of people there, and we spoke through a lot of stuff that had been put. Jean had created this kind of background for the commission about kind of purpose and different ideas about motorsport, and Peter Bear, who's the General Secretary for Sport, just talked me through it. And about 45 minutes into the meeting, he said, oh, we haven't told you why we've brought you here today, have we? And I kind of said, well, I thought it was just about this. And he said, well, it is, but Jean has created a commission and he'd like you to be president of it. Yeah. I couldn't believe it.
Amazing.
I just, you know, it was crazy. Of course, I said yes. And then, yeah.
I think about that for a minute. Yeah.
And Jean came up from his office. Peter phoned him, and he came up and said thank you. And he said, you know, look, this isn't a commission for the sake of a commission. We've got work to do. We need to make positive change. And can I count on your support to do that? And I said, absolutely. And I've been working with them ever since. So yeah, it was an incredible day.
Fantastic. And so what are the hopes? Are there sort of plans afoot? Are there things that you can even talk about and share at the moment? What you know, that's obviously a couple of years ago. We've had COVID in between.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the first thing that we did was sort out the legislation in the International Sporting Code. So in Appendix L of the International Sporting Code, there's a section in there for disabled participation in motorsport. And quite a bit of the legislation was quite outdated. So it had been put in there at some point with, you know, the experience that the FIA had of people competing with disability at the time. And there were certain things in there that you could see had been put in specifically for individual drivers. There was quite a bit in there that had been literally put in the appendix so that Alex Zanardi could compete. So the legislation was quite fragmented and not very relevant, or some of it was not very relevant for today's kind of motorsport. So the first thing we did was we changed quite a bit of that as it made sense to. Other things we've done, there's currently a disabled drivers grant to give disabled drivers the access to the highest safety level of equipment. So fire extinguishers, fuel cells, and fireproof clothing. We've put in something called the Certificate of Adaptations, which allows homologated cars to run with adaptations still as homologated cars. Just briefly, homologation is basically, it's a strict paper that dictates what a car is allowed to be running with. Very, very strict legislation. And if you change any of a homologated car, it then becomes, well, the homologation is lost. So adapting a homologated car effectively loses its homologation papers. So we've put in place a process that assesses the controls in terms of their sporting compliance as well as their safety aspects. So we've done, there's a lot of different things that we've done along the way. One of the other things is accessible podiums. So we want all of the F1 venues to be accessible. Silverstone, I'm hoping, is going to be the kind of shining light and the one that is hopefully one of the first to come on board with us in this campaign. So yeah, like a lot of different stuff going on. But you asked about legacy, and I have one ambition with the Commission in terms of legacy, and that is that we create such an inclusive environment for motorsport, and we create a disabled motorsport that is so feasible and so normal that disabled kids can watch Formula One and actually have ambition to be Formula One drivers, because we will have come so far that would be a reality. And that's my ambition with the commission.
Rock and roll, really like that, definitely. And you're obviously supporting that again in part with the charity that you co-founded. So talk to us about that, because that's giving people opportunity to get out on a track in a car, specially designed, presumably, and to feel what you feel and have felt and continue to feel when you're out there.
Yeah, so Spinal Track was created in 2016, a year after I'd started racing, purely because I was receiving a lot of messages on social media from people in my position who'd seen what I was doing and wanted to know how they could have a go. And at the time, there was nothing that I could point them to allow them to do that. So my partner, who came from a surveying background, disillusioned with his career, wanted something different, has grown up with motorsport. His dad was a champion rally driver. He is as well. And we decided to create this in our spare time, just to give people what I love about, motorsport in essence. So at first we bought a Golf GTI track car as a kind of track toy for both of us from a fellow paraplegic. So it was already set up with everything we needed. And we started running that as kind of the Spinal Track car to allow people to come and have a go at what we were offering. And in the beginning, I was adamant that whatever we created wouldn't be something that only people with money could do, because I've kind of, through my disabled sports kind of careers, been exposed to people who have either had compensation for their accidents or people who hadn't, and people who hadn't, who have to live on kind of government benefits and or get jobs as a disabled person. Is life's tough, and opportunity isn't as readily available for some of my or hasn't been readily available for some of my teammates in wheelchair rugby. So I was adamant that this wasn't going to be one of those things that only people with money could do. So we decided to run it as a charity once we got charitable status in 2017, and we get sponsors to fund the program. So Spinal Track has no paid roles in it. Everyone's a volunteer, and the driving experiences are offered for free through funding through the sponsors that we have on board, which is great, and it's how I will always want to run it. But we went from having one Golf GTI track car in 2016 to now having 3 Golf GTIs that we run around Silverstone. Silverstone are one of our supporters, and are really we're actually one of the reasons that we could get off the ground in the first instance with how they supported us in the early days. But we now run a rally program as well at the Bilgwyn Rally School, where we have 2 Toyota GT86 rally cars, and we're just currently building a BMW E46, I think. So yeah, it's cool. We love it. It's, the experience that people have from the days is to see what people get from it is our motivation for kind of carrying on with it. So yeah.
Well, we're going to make sure in the show notes to this podcast and the YouTube video that we have links to all of this different stuff. So for the charity, for your personal website, FIA obviously, and anything else that you want to include, especially for those listening to this who run businesses, which is a lot of them. Perhaps there's an opportunity here to get involved, to support, to sponsor, and to give back, certainly if you're involved in motorsport or technology, which most of you guys and girls are. So check it out. Talking about Silverstone. So I know the story, but most people may not. Tell us about the story where you met a famous race driver on a podium, and the narrative behind that.
So that was another crazy day. So that started with, I've obviously presented Kimi Raikkonen with his trophy after the British Grand Prix in 2018. And that started by David Richards when he took on the chairman role with Motorsport UK. in 2018, he had invited me to the trustee meeting to speak about my experiences with licensing and being a disabled driver early on in the year. And he then invited me back to his house with the rest of the trustees for dinner. And he said to me, come a little bit earlier so I can just show you around so that you're comfortable, make sure that everything's accessible for you. So I said, great. So Andrew and I went along, and we were in the garden and we had a glass of champagne, and David said to me, are you going to the British Grand Prix this year? And I said, yes, I am. I'm going as guests of Motorsport UK on the Saturday and guests of the FIA on the Sunday. And he said, good, because you'll be presenting the third place trophy on the podium after the race. And
Brilliant.
I just looked at him and I said, oh my God, thank you. Like I couldn't say anything for a good period of time because historically or traditionally, the third place trophy is presented to the driver by the chairman of the ASN in all the countries. So David had obviously wanted to, he just said to me, look, you know, I really support what you're doing with the FIA and I want to give you some added visibility for the cause. And I think this is a great opportunity to do it. And so I got all excited about it. And then he said, I haven't cleared this with John yet, so don't tell anyone about it. And I was like, what? So I mean, I knew Jean would be on board because, you know, it was promoting disability in motorsports, but I couldn't tell anyone until kind of 2 weeks before. I couldn't even tell my mum because I knew that she would tell everyone. I had to keep it under wraps. But I mean, the day was incredible. It was a crazy week. So I'd been to the Churchill shooting ground on the Wednesday on behalf of Wings for Life, which is a charity that I'm an ambassador for. It's a Red Bull funded charity that searches for a cure for paralysis. And I'd been invited to go and speak in front of the Red Bull team who were on like a team building day to raise money for Wings for Life. So Max was there, Daniel Ricciardo, Christian Horner, Mark Webber, David Coulthard, who are both also ambassadors for Wings for Life. And I spoke about my story, which was crazy, you know, me being able to tell my story to all these incredible people that, you know, a lot of people's heroes. And then that evening, I went to the F1 Ball in London and spoke on stage there alongside Mark Webber on behalf of Wings for Life again. So I'd already kind of met, well, I hadn't met Max properly, but I'd met a few of the guys who would be at the race. And so I was given some hospitality passes to the Red Bull hospitality in the paddock. And I had a light chat with Max, had a chat with Christian. So I was like, this is crazy that I'm just speaking to these people who, you know, most people don't even get to meet.
Yeah.
And this was on the Saturday, and I saw Kimi late on in the paddock, and I wanted to either present the trophy to Max or Kimi. And I saw Kimi and I thought, right, I'm going to go and introduce myself to him. And he was being harassed by another fan. And I said, oh, hi, Kimi. My name's Nathalie McGloin. I'm president of the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission. I'll be presenting the third place trophy on the podium on tomorrow. And I think he looked at me and thought, crazy woman in a wheelchair. Like, of course she is. And so I said, can I get a photo with you? And so he said, yeah. And I said, oh, I didn't see how qualifying went. How did you do? And he said, I qualified third. And I said, well, I might be presenting you with a trophy then. And he said, well, if you are, you want to get yourself a different trophy because I don't want to come third. I kind of thought, fair enough. And so I went home next day like crazy. I couldn't contain my excitement. And then when the time came around to going onto the podium, obviously all of the dignitaries go onto the podium beforehand, and we were kind of set back from the walkway of the drivers. So when the drivers came onto the podium, they didn't see us. They're obviously waving to the crowd, and they all went to their places. And I was kind of sat slightly behind where the trophies were sitting on this pedestal. And so Kimi couldn't see me. And so as I kind of went round the corner with the trophy on my lap and he saw me, his face completely changed, and his face lit up and he smiled and he jumped down from his step and he said, "Oh, it's you." And I said, "Well, told you I was going to be here." And yeah, we had a little moment and he shook my hand, and then Lewis and Sebastian both shook my hand as well. They made the effort to come down because I couldn't get round to meet them because of the gap of the other podiums. So they were really sweet. And yeah, it was the best day of my life. It was incredible. And they all took the time to speak to me afterwards and have photos. And it was crazy. I was so privileged to be given that opportunity.
But what an amazing platform and opportunity for others to be able to see you on there doing that, shaking hands, avoiding champagne. And
they actually got briefed about that in the green room, because I said to the guy who organises it, I said, "I've got to go to France tomorrow and I don't want my wheelchair to smell of champagne. So can you ask them just not to soak me in it?" So he actually said to them, "You're not allowed to pop the champagne until she's gone around the corner."
Brilliant. And presumably they obeyed that rule. And,
they did, yeah, they did.
And then pop them open. Oh, honestly, what a phenomenal story. And look, you're talking about, that's the reason I really wanted you on. You're clearly very humble and huge levels of humility, which is just phenomenal in relation to being able to meet these people and to do this. But I think the flip of that is to many other people, not just in this country and around the world, I can only assume that you are an absolute hero to them for what you're doing and what you're representing and the legacy you're trying to build. So I'm going to just say that out loud.
Thank you.
And I'm going to move on to other questions, but I can candidly say that, even just in this 20-30 minute interview. So, right, let's move on to some fun questions, some quick fire questions. So,
okay.
Favourite circuit?
Silverstone.
Of course. Favourite race series?
What I compete in, or
both?
I love touring cars. Like touring cars, I love. It's just ace. My favourite race series to compete in, 750.
Okay. So obviously, British touring car I love as well. I just love the rubbing and the bumping, and it's just super fun to watch. Certainly from a spectator's perspective, also more accessible and cheaper to go and watch. And obviously Nick Hamilton's racing in that as well.
Indeed.
Flying the flag, so awesome. Favourite driver, if you have one?
Might be Billy.
Yeah, God, that guy's an equal rock star. Right?
Yes.
Like absolute rock star.
Well, obviously Kimi is the ultimate favourite.
Of course.
But I think I'm privileged to know Billy, so
yeah,
I just think he's amazing.
Yeah, for what he went through, then to come back the following season, it's just like. So I've messaged him and asked him to come on this as well. So Billy, if you're listening or watching this, come on, let's share your story. We have a really silly question that we ask at the end of most podcasts. What's the king or queen of crisps?
Salt and vinegar.
What make?
Actually, no. Pom Bears.
Pom Bears. My Louise will be in your corner there. Absolutely loves Pom Bears.
Another packet of Pom Bears.
You are the first in, I think, 30 interviews to say Pom Bears. So you completely own that situation. Right, what other questions have I got? I've got so many. I don't want to take up much more of your time, if I'm honest, Nathalie, but next generation, girls on track, STEM. So back in, I think it was February, March, we did a pre-COVID, we did a special International Women's Day, but it was like International Women's Week special with some other phenomenal women. So we had Christiana Pace, who's FIA, Catherine Richards from Mercedes, Lena Gadd, who's the first female race engineer to win Le Mans 24 hours, drop the mic, Louise Goodman, who was just giving me complete education and learning on how to be a broadcaster. And many other women as well, phenomenal women, all talking about next generation, STEM, girls on track. 1-2 minutes. What do you think? What's the again, this is the legacy piece, but hopes for the future?
Well, I think the future for women in motorsport is really positive and really bright. I think the Girls on Track programme, for which I'm an ambassador for, is brilliant. I would actually like to do something like that, or the Girls on Track programme that happened at the FIA, where they kind of went round and got girls to compete together, and then the top 2 went on to compete at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in the karting series. I'd like to do that with disabled drivers. I think it was brilliant. But I think the W series as well, I think there are 2 kind of like approaches you need to get women or disabled drivers or minority groups to start out in motorsport and continue. And the first is grassroots, get the kids in, get them interested, and secondly, have visibility for them or for other people that it's happening, that women are competing. And the W series does that. You know, it's not a series of female drivers, it's a series of very competitive drivers who happen to be female.
Yeah.
And the exposure that they get is brilliant. The opportunities that the individual drivers have had off the back of that is brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a proper thing, you know, the money that there was at stake for prize money, and the you know, who the series was supporting. It was huge. It was done properly. It wasn't a token gesture.
Yeah.
And you know, it's obviously this year has been this year, but next year I'm sure it's going to get bigger and better. And you know, the motivation for it is honest as well. You know, it's a genuine want to increase female participation in motorsport. It's not just a box ticking. And I think that that's why it's successful, because it's been done in the right way. And I think the Girls on Track programme, with getting young girls to start thinking differently about what their options are with STEM, with engineering, with competing, I think the joined up thinking between those 2 kind of camps are really important to getting a successful change in seeing a parity of gender in the sport. And I believe that, you know, with disabled motorsport as well, that we can learn from how the kind of women in motorsport commissions have done, and kind of follow suit with that attitude as well.
What with the potential hope of having its own independent race series similar to the female?
I don't know whether an independent race. I definitely think the Girls on Track programme of getting young disabled kids into karting, having a look at the different options for them with engineering and STEM and all the rest of it, and showing what is available for disabled kids to actually go and do.
Yeah.
And then some kind of publicity for, you know, giving some platforms to disabled drivers already competing, to show disabled kids that it is happening. I mean, Nick Hamilton does so much for kids with cerebral palsy to show that it is possible. Billy as well, Alex Zanardi when he was competing. But there are so many disabled drivers across the world, really successful disabled drivers, doing great things, that just don't have the platform to be able to just shout about it. So a disabled series, if there ever was a disabled series, it would be purely for publicity, to show what was possible, as opposed to needing that for disabled people to compete, like the W series. You know, women can compete against men, disabled people can compete against non-disabled people, but having that platform just highlights it and shows that it's happening, that it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And just for those listening and watching this, certainly with the sort of narrative along the future employment and career options, our business Longhurst is based on Silverstone Park, which is next door to Silverstone Circuits, which is why we're called Inside Silverstone. In and around Silverstone Park are, I think, over 2,000 businesses within an hour's drive, all serving and connected to businesses involved in motorsport, engineering, STEM, technology, you know, AI, and clearly race series. And so check out the Silverstone Park website. I'll include in the show notes a link for that. So certainly for those who are looking for education paths, career paths, you wouldn't fall short of checking that in our location out. Nathalie, Nathalie, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been phenomenal. You've been a good sport. Great question answer regarding the Pom Bears. That is certainly winning the crisp question so far, which is
maybe for potential sponsorship for next year. Pom Bear Racing.
Imagine a car wrapped in Pom Bear logos.
Be good.
That'd be
or a car full of Pom Bears.
Or a boot full. Every time you race, there's a boot full of them. Absolutely. Nathalie, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to make sure, as I said in the show notes, we've got lots of links so people listening and watching this can find you. You can look into the charity that you're involved in from a corporate sponsorship potential. And clearly myself and everyone else will be keeping a keen eye on what you're doing. And I can only wish you huge success with everything that you're racing from the FIA and the legacy that you will no doubt build just because of your tenacity and clear hard work and because you're badass. So Nathalie, and eventually when lockdown's over, happy to take you and your fella out for a drink in Toaster and meet at a pub, have a gin and tonic or a beer and a packet of Pom Bears.
That sounds absolutely perfect. I would love to do that.
Nathalie, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.